Sex lessons, British style. Behind the headlines surrounding a new survey lies even more important lessons about the virtues of collecting intimate sex details and studying them. The French don't get all hung up on monogamy. Americans are relaxed about dating. Italian lovers are, we're told, passionate. And the Scandinavians are more open-minded than most in the bedroom. When it comes to national stereotypes about relationships, the British don't fare too well. Think Hugh Grant in 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Or for that matter, Hugh Grant in any film. We are said to have so many hang-ups that we don't even talk about sex until we are in a pub, and to need to be blind drunk before anything approaching physical contact occurs. Of course, national stereotypes are of limited use, but they don't come out of thin air either. However, maybe it's time to begin updating preju- pre- prejudice, prejudices if results from the details and wide-ranging third national surveys of sexual attitudes and lifestyles NATO 3 or anything to go by. It suggests that Brits are gradually becoming more comfortable openly discussing sex, more experimental and more tolerant towards others. Even though the 15,000 people interviewed for NATO were English, Scottish, and Welsh, the findings hold insights for others around the world. Similar numbers were surveyed in 1990 to 1991 and 1999 to 2001, allowing changes to be tracked over 2 decades and making it the largest study of its kind ever to have been carried out. It's a fair, but what sort of headlines NATO 3 will attract? Something along the lines of young people are doing it sooner, men are doing it less, women are doing it more, and women are doing it with women much more. While these facts are interesting and will no doubt be widely discussed, 20 researchers and 491 survey interviewers did not spend several years and over $10 million of grant money just to satisfy our curiosity about who is doing what to whom and how often. The main original motivation for the first NATO study was for much more profound reason. In the late 1980s, the numbers of AIDS cases was growing rapidly, and the only way to make accurate predictions about future trends was to gather some accurate data. The project almost died before it could get underway when, under the front page headline, "Thatcher Holds Survey on Sex," the Sunday Times newspaper reported in September 1989 that the then Prime Minister had decided that asking people about the intimate details of their sex lives was an intrusion into their privacy. The study went ahead with funding from the charitable foundation Welcome Trust, whose leadership believed the data it would generate was crucial for dealing with the AIDS crisis. It's easy to forget that people didn't talk about these things at part, dinner parties back then. Professor Dan N. Johnson, who founded NATSO and still leads the group that runs it, told me in an interview a couple of years ago. Such official prudishness is hard to imagine today. The results of NATSO 3 offer signs that Britons have become more comfortable with their own sexual and more tolerant. The proportion of women reporting having had sex with female partners has quad, quad, quadrupled in 20 years and doubled in the last 10. For men, the proportion is 1 in 20, 4.8%, up from 1 in 28, 3.6% in 1990. These shifts are most likely explained by people becoming more experimental and more willing to report their behavior. Britons are also becoming more tolerant towards others. In 1990, only a quarter of respondents thought there was nothing wrong with same-sex relationships. This proportion has risen to half of men and two-thirds of women. Many findings within NATSO 3 are less likely to make headlines, but help show why the study and others like it can be useful and important for sexual and reproductive health for policymakers and providers, and not just those working in Britain. It shows, for example, that Britons are much more likely to attend sexual health clinics than they did a decade ago. Unplanned pregnancies are associated with sex before 16, smoking, drug use, depression, lower educational achievement, and sex education from non-school sources. 1 in 10, 9.8% of women report having been forced to have sex against their wishes. Only 15% of sexual violence perpetrators are strangers, while 17% reported that their sex lives were affected by ill health. Less than a quarter of them said that sought help for that. Those who find talking about sex with others difficult are more likely to have sexual function problems. Johnson points out that most magazine surveys about sexual practices spread false information because those who take part tend to be more sexually active than average, leading, for example, to young people feeling pressure to have sex before they really want to. The research has already proved importance of those involved in sex education, planning of contraception, and sexual health services, said the researchers. NATSO 3 included a large age range, with respondents up to the age of 74 and a greater focus on the relationship between sexual health and general health. The study doesn't of course tell us anything about how British people compare to others around the world, but it does suggest that the old prejudices and embarrassments highlighted so vividly when the government withdrew public funding for NATSO almost a generation ago are at last fading into history. Johnson and her colleagues are surely right that we are in a much better place if we have access to accurate data on sexual practice and attitudes, and are able to discuss sex in a grown-up way. Will we ever banish boldness? Is the end of the shining head in sight, or are there no shoots of hope for treatment? Daniel Cousins investigates. Nothing reminds a man of his mortality more than a retreating hairline or the peach fuzz feel of his thinning crown. For men in entering middle age, effective ways to avoid hair loss can't come soon enough, but balding has long proved a slippery slope for scientists. Despite decades of research, the fundamental biological mechanisms underlying it are not well understood. The question is whether there are any signs that it will change. For a long time there was a hiatus in terms of coming up with new ideas, says Angela Cristiano of Columbia University in New York. But right now it is a really exciting time for the field. We have been pondering the causes of male pattern baldness, also known as androgenetic genetic alopecia, for centuries. The Greek philosopher Aristotle noticed that eunuchs don't go bald. Eunuchs don't go bald. We now know this is because a byproduct of the hormone testosterone testosterone produced in the testicles, called DHT, gradually shrinks hair follicles in the scalp, reducing the length and thickness of the fibers produced until they no longer breach the surface of the skin. Unfortunately, we don't know much more than that. There are hair loss treatments that have been approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, such as finasteride, Propecia, and minoxidil Rogaine, which can prevent or slow hair loss in some men. Their virtues were discovered serendipitously as side effects of drugs developed for other elements. But right now there are no drugs that can reverse hair loss. To do that, you need a hair transplant, an expensive and gloriously invasive procedure in which fully functional follicles from the back of the scalp are relocated to desolate patches elsewhere. The biology behind baldness may be complex, but the last few years have seen what could be described as hair rising progress. In 2012, Luis Garza of Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore and colleagues discovered that a lipid compound called prostaglandin D2 (PGD2) plays a key role in squeezing the life out of follicles. Gene expression analysis showed that PGD2 and the enzyme that makes it were far more abundant in body than non-body scopes. Most importantly, when the researchers added PGD2 to human follicles in a petri dish, hair growth was dramatically reduced. The team also pinpointed the receptor on follicle cells to which PGD2 attaches to do its dastardly deed. In mice without the receptor known as GPR44, PGD2 did not restrain hair growth. If the same is true in humans and we can figure out how to interrupt this mechanism by either blocking the receptor or disabling the enzyme that makes PGD2, we could put the brakes on hair loss. We now have a very good target, says Garza. Drug promise. Conveniently enough, pharmaceutical companies are already testing drugs designed to block GPR44, as this has been implicated in allergic conditions such as asthma. That's a great place to start, says Garza. But even if an existing compound blocks the version of the receptor on follicle cells and stops hair loss in lab-cultured follicles, the path to human trials is long and expensive. What's more, the PGD2 receptor may not be working alone. Instead, it may be just one of several agents that trigger follicle regression, and it's possible that it plays only a minor role. We don't know how central PGD2's role is until a treatment based on it is tested properly in humans, because there are no animal models of male pattern baldness. It's got to be worth trying, says Garza, because a treatment for baldness that really worked would be an enormous blockbuster. It remains to be seen if restraining PGD2 can reverse balding and induce the growth of new hair in bald skin. If not, it won't be much help to people who have already lost their hair. That's why some scientists are trying to figure out how to make their hair follicles, a process known as follicular neogenesis. One way to do that is to extract dermal papillae, skin cells that usually instruct surrounding cells to generate follicles, from a healthy patch of scalp, grow and multiply them in a dish, and then implant them into bald skin. The technique works a treat in rodents, but unfortunately, then dermal papillae taken from humans are cultured in the lab. They quickly lost the ability to induce new follicles. Perhaps the problem was the way they were grown. Earlier this year, a team led by Cristiano found that in cells cultivated on a flat surface, the normal expression of almost 4,000 key genes was disrupted. However, she discovered that cultured thermopapulae maintain their ability to induce follicles if you grow them in hanging droplets of liquid nutrients instead. Next, the researchers implanted the cells into hairless human skin that had been grafted onto rats. 6 weeks later, dermopapulae from 5 of 7 donors had generated new follicles. In 2 cases, the follicles had begun to produce hairs. This method restored the functioning of 22% of genes to normal. However, to ensure the production of robust hairs, the researchers need to figure out how to restore the functioning of a greater proportion. Cristiano's team is now working on a chemical concoction that would do just that. If they can reactivate even half of the genes, there is a good chance that the new follicles will make robust hairs and crucially have a normal growth cycle, which means they will continue to produce hair after it naturally falls out. To avoid patients resembling crazed Barbie dolls, researchers must also develop an implant device that ensures follicles sprout hairs at an angle of 30 to 45 degrees to the scalp. End of transplants. Meanwhile, in an attempt to eliminate the need of transplants altogether, some groups are trying to trick skin cells into generating new follicles on the head. In 2007, George Kotsourelis of the University of Pennsylvania found that in mice that would healing process reprogram skin cells to an embryonic state, providing a short window of time in which they can be enticed to become follicles. His team also identified a key chemical signaling mechanism behind the process. Blocking these signals in mice reduced the number of new follicles, whereas enhancing the signals increased follicle numbers. Boston-based company called Follica has come up a treatment based on this discovery. It is tight-lipped on the details, but the basic idea is to use a proprietary device that removes the top layer of skin to turn the clock back on skin cells. Before applying a cocktail of chemicals, Follica claims its tests show the process has been shown to consistently create new follicles in humans. However, the research is unpublished. Then last year, Kotsourelis revealed that the protein called FGF9 plays an important role in persuading skin cells to transform into follicles in wounded mice, apparently by amplifying the molecular signals that kick-start the process. If it has the same effect in humans, the protein could make follicle therapy even more effective. The nice thing about the FGF9 story is that it sets off a cascade of events that led to hair follicle formation, says Cozzarelli. Balding is perhaps top of the list of the triggers of the infamous midlife crisis, when men are said to try to recapture their youth by splashing out on Ferraris and ill-advised tattoos. Recent insights do offer new shoots of hope for more effective future treatments. For now, however, the biology of hair loss and development remains mysterious. Luxury car dealerships and tattoo parlors that rely on a steady stream of men thinning on top need not fear for their incomes for the next few years at least. If you would like to no, sorry. Why science needs imagination and beauty. How do the best scientists solve life's greatest mysteries? A Nobel Prize winner takes you inside his mind and explains why the key is imaginative play. Explain. Albert Einstein famously said, imagination is more important than knowledge. They are both important, says physicist and Nobel Prize recipient Frank Wilczek. But knowledge without imagination is barren. Take his subject of the theoretical physics. As Wilczek says, a lot of what you do is to try to understand Mother Nature's mind and her sense of beauty, to see how the laws of physics could be more beautiful. Not many people truly appreciate what happened in physics in the last part of 20th century. We understand at a level whose profundity would be difficult to exaggerate what matter is. We really have equations for the different fundamental building blocks of matter. The different particles have mathematical characterizations that are precise and elegant. They have no secrets. In principle, we have the equations. The bad news, however, is we are not so good at solving them. There are still gaps in fundamental understanding. We have very good equations or practical purposes, but they are kind of lopsided. They are beautiful, but not quite as beautiful as they should be given they are close to God's last word in some sense. We are trying to think of better ways to solve the equations, which takes a lot of imagination because they describe an unfamiliar world. It's a very small world that things behave differently in it. The only way to get experience is to play around with equations and imagine how they might behave in different circumstances. It's more like imaginative play than anything else. The laws we have discovered, especially in quantum world, are so strange you have to play with them in your mind. Usually what you envision is wrong, but it's mind expanding, and every once in a while you see something that may be right. Sometimes it even is right. The questions we are now able to ask are so compelling, so extraordinary. What is most of the universe made of? Are the laws of physics ultimately unified? Well, what was the Big Bang like? You just say them and they have such grandeur. The more you learn about the equations, the more you learn about physics, the more you learn how beautiful it is. That's the real value. It's an ornament to the human mind.